Amazing CEO reveals heartbreaking story. What happens next? Sarah stood behind the checkout counter, her exhausted eyes scanning groceries while her mind raced with the weight of her responsibilities. Each beep of the register felt like a reminder of her struggle. 5 months ago, Mia had entered her world, a tiny being who relied entirely on Sarah for survival. Yet here she was, sacrificing lunches to ensure she could afford formula. 3 skipped lunches per week, a diet of caffeine and quick bites between customers left her dizzy but driven. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when Sarah learned through whispers among her coworkers that the grocery store was facing the possibility of closing down. The local buzz around town hinted at cost-cutting measures linked to decisions made by the corporate office, a place disconnected from the realities Sarah and her fellow workers lived day in and out. Each conversation tightened the knot in her stomach, transforming her initial exhaustion into an aching panic, her fingers trembling as they sorted through discounted canned goods. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. But the emotional chaos didn't subside. Rather, it intensified. What would happen to Mia if the store closed? What would she do without the regular paycheck? Her heart raced, each rapid beat a drum signaling failure. If the store disappeared, so would her already stretched income, shattering their fragile stability. She clenched her jaw, a surge of determination coursing through her. As Sarah gathered her courage, she initiated talks with her coworkers. They rallied together, sharing not just concern, but also their fears and hopes. Each conversation reignited her purpose. They couldn't let their livelihoods be swept away by corporate decisions made sitting in plush offices. The thought of standing up against corporate greed consumed her entirely. Would it jeopardize her job, or worse, create a rift among her friends? Yet, in the midst of this escalating dread, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. She reached out to Mark, the CEO who had unknowingly triggered their anxiety. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Mark was grappling too. The scale of his success sent ripples of doubt through his ambition. A nagging guilt hovered in his mind, especially as he glanced at homes like Sarah's, knowing how many relied on the store for sustenance. He remembered his own family's roots, a small-town upbringing where every dollar counted, much like Sarah's. Sarah was set to confront him, with her plea, With each fast-paced step toward the office, anxiety washed over her anew. The stakes were higher than ever. Would he listen? Could he see her desperation? Her resolve, lined with fear, pressed heavily against the tension already threading through her veins. In her quest for answers, she reached for the reality unfolding ahead, both for herself and the community that felt the clock ticking louder with every hour. Were they destined for inevitable loss, or could this be a turning point? The door creaked open, revealing Mark's office bathed in a soft glow from the overhead lights. Sarah hesitated on the threshold, her chest tight with doubt. Confronting him felt like staring into a whirlwind. She could either be swept away or emerge empowered. She inhaled deeply, steeling herself for this pivotal moment. As she stepped inside, Mark raised his head from the documents spread before him. His expression transformed from surprise to a shade of concern. "Sarah," he began, standing as if to heighten the moment. "What brings you here?" The gravity of her mission pressed heavily on her shoulders. "I need to speak with you about the store's future," she managed, her voice steadying. "People are scared. I'm scared." Mark's brow furrowed as he gestured for her to sit.
"I expected you'd want to talk about the changes," he said gently, leaning back in his chair. "But this isn't an easy conversation. There are factors beyond our control." "Factors like which?" Sarah asked sharply, her heart pounding. "The decisions made in a boardroom where they don't even know our names, where we're just numbers. You have the ability to listen to us, to understand our struggle." Each word was a brick in her wall of courage, each sentiment echoing her desperation. Mark's eyes shifted, a flicker of recognition flashing across his face. "Look, I get that. You think I don't remember what it was like. I grew up in a tough environment too. But the corporation is focused on cuts. They think long-term, not realizing what it really does to the people who keep the doors open." "They won't care until it's too late," Sarah pressed. "We can't just accept it. We're fighting for our lives, for a future. If this store closes, we could lose everything." Mark's gaze softened, and she could see how the weight of her words landed heavily on his conscience. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, voice low, almost pleading. Taking a moment to collect her thoughts, Sarah realized this wasn't just about asking for favors. This was about showing him the human cost behind the figures, transforming fear into action. "I want you to advocate for us, to ensure that corporate doesn't overlook the people who rely on this place. We're fighting to keep it alive, to sustain our livelihoods. Can you bring this up during the next meeting?" His demeanor shifted, the tension in the room palpable as he seemed to grapple with her request.
"I'll bring it up," he finally conceded, but doubt lingered. "But I can't promise anything. The board makes the final call." "Just try," she said, frustration bubbling close to the surface. "Don't just stand by and let this happen. Use your voice." As she exited the office, adrenaline surged through her. This confrontation had brought clarity. Mark might have agreed, but she knew it wasn't enough. He needed to see beyond the bottom line, beyond the sterile figures that masked the lives of each employee. Returning to her station, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about her own agency and the ability to push for change. The skips in her lunches suddenly transformed from mere sacrifices to a symbol of her fight against the odds. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself devising an impromptu strategy. If their voiceless concerns were to reach the board, she would need to galvanize her coworkers into action. Together, they could amplify their voices, make them heard, not just by Mark, but at the corporate level. She felt the stakes rise, could sense the urgency pulsing in the air, but an inkling of hesitation lingered. The dread of consequences loomed large. Would they all face backlash? Would she be a catalyst for positive change or a harbinger of despair? As the clock ticked down to a pending board meeting, Sarah's determination solidified. The time had come for others to realize, too, just how much hung in the balance. She couldn't let fear anchor her down any longer. But with every ounce of ambition came a nagging apprehension. Were they prepared for the storm that confrontation could unleash? Would fire collide with the fragile framework of their relationships, jeopardizing everything she held dear? With that tension coiling tighter, Sarah knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just aiming to survive. She was ready to fight. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a heaviness that settled over Sarah like a thick fog. Each tick of the clock in the break room echoed in her chest, a constant reminder of the risk she was about to take. This wasn't merely about her or even the store. It was about everyone whose life was intricately woven into the fabric of everyday work. She joined her colleagues in the break room, their faces a tapestry of anxious anticipation. Throwing her shoulders back, Sarah resolved that if they were going to face this storm, she would lead them through it. "We need to talk," she ventured, her voice steady despite the unease swirling within her. "About what?" Jennifer, a fellow cashier, asked, nervously adjusting her apron. About how we approach the meeting today. We have to be united, emphasize the human cost of their decisions. They see us as numbers. We have to show them we're much more. The murmurs around her grew, some reluctant, others emboldened by her words. Encouraged, Sarah pressed on. We can't just let Mark fight this. Battle alone. We need to make our voices heard. This is not a matter of individual concerns, it's our livelihood. We deserve to be recognized. A few nodded in agreement, but she noticed Mark lingering at the doorway, eavesdropping. His presence reminded her of the fragile alliance they had forged. Yet it also amplified her resolve to embody the voice of her coworkers, an embodiment of those countless ingrained fears. As the morning wore on, Sarah found herself reconciling her fears and aspirations. She had avoided confrontation for too long, both in her personal life and here at work. Yet now that she pushed through herself, she realized she had entered undiscovered territory, equipped with more than just ambition. She had a burgeoning resolve. The clock struck the hour, and they headed to the meeting room, guides through a maze of doubt and uncertainty. Upon entering, Sarah watched Mark set up the presentation, the tension surrounding the air thick like syrup. As the board members took their seats, Sarah felt a vortex of energy within her. She glanced at her colleagues. They appeared to share her collective anxiety, mixed with a glimmer of hope. She had prepared to speak, to advocate for more than just survival. Mark opened the meeting with a brief overview, but Sarah could feel the room's atmosphere shift when he mentioned cutbacks. The conversation began to spin toward statistics, gross margins, and forecasts. It started like a rehearsal of the familiar, a replay of countless meetings without heart, devoid of real consequence. Without thinking, Sarah interjected, her voice breaking through the monotony. "Can I add something?" she asked, surprising even herself. All eyes turned to her, and her heart raced. She embraced the surge of adrenaline. "We're not just numbers in your projections. We're families. We're futures. If you cut our hours or close the store, you're leaving us with nothing. I want you to remember that each small decision you make ripples into our lives. We matter." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's expression shifted to one of palpable concern as he registered the weight of her words. The awkward stillness that hung in the air begged for a resolution, and the board's composed demeanor began to falter. In that moment, Sarah felt something stir within her, a mix of defiance and newfound strength, driving her to continue. "You may see us as a line in a ledger, but we're here to tell you that we exist beyond your spreadsheets." The temperature in the room shifted, voices murmuring, uncertainty creeping in on the executives' confident facades. She'd spoken from a place of truth, and now it was time to see whether it would translate into action. Suddenly, a board member, Mr. Thompson, leaned forward. "Interest in employees? You think that'll change things?" His tone was mocking, erecting a wall where there should have been dialogue. For a heartbeat, her resolve wavered, but then she met his gaze with unflinching clarity. Everything came from being seen and being heard. "I won't be dismissed again." A subtle determination sparked within her colleagues, and she realized they had followed her lead, their quiet strength coalescing into a collective memory of what they stood to lose. Though the stage was set for potential confrontation, one question lingered in Sarah's mind. Would they galvanize the board's compassion or shatter even the faintest hope? As she stood at the precipice of change, an unsettling reality dawned. Not everyone was prepared to embrace the human story she championed. Would her push inspire a shift or multiply their challenges? With rich anticipation tangled in anxiety, the first decision loomed. What would happen once the truth was laid bare? The tension in the room became a palpable entity, clinging to the air like heavy humidity. Sarah could see the board members exchanging furtive glances as they processed her words, the weight of her declaration settling down like a stone in their carefully constructed narrative. Her heart raced, emboldened by the precarious support from her colleagues. It was no longer just about her. Each dropped glance, each fidgeting hand echoed the plight of all those facing a similar vulnerability. A blend of fear and urgency coursed through her veins, reinvigorated by the silence. She sensed that she was teetering on a pivotal edge, her previous avoidance of confrontation stripped away by necessity and urgency. Mark nudged her slightly, a subtle signal to retreat, but she held firm. Inside her, a newfound awareness churned, the uncomfortable truth that her past tendencies towards restraint had silenced others for too long. This was her moment to pivot from the shadows, to break free from the passive role she had occupied in both her work and personal life. As Mr. Thompson waved dismissively, the board was clearly unprepared for a discussion of values over numbers. For a fleeting moment, doubt enveloped her again. Was her voice strong enough to carve out space for a narrative that cherished the human cost behind corporate decisions? Would they continue to hide behind financial jargon, or would this be the day that marked a shift in their perspective? Look, I understand that in your world, numbers matter, but those numbers translate to real lives, Sarah continued, her voice rising with an intensity fueled by her conviction. Our hours, our income, they dictate the lives we lead outside of these walls. We work hard. We have families that depend on us. Whispers among board members quaked like echoing thunder, yet the reluctance remained. Sarah gritted her teeth, refusing to yield to the paddle against the waves of uncertainty that threatened to swallow her words. Her responsibility was no longer to seek approval. It was to insist on visibility, to demand recognition of their humanity in the eye of cold economic calculations. Glancing at Mark, Sarah caught the movement in his shoulders, a slight urge to intervene. She knew they needed to tread carefully. Confrontation could easily veer into chaos. But she also recognized that clarity was crucial to their survival, and
the stakes were too high for half measures. Mr. Thompson, if you understand anything about being a leader, it's that people need to feel valued, not just counted, she shot back, her voice unwavering. We deserve a chance to discuss our roles, our futures, not just in relation to profit margins, but as working individuals whose contributions are far more meaningful than a line item on your budget. The room shifted again, the air heavier with contemplation. Each board member wore expressions ranging from skepticism to intrigue. Sarah could feel the fine line they were walking, and she was simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. This back and forth might fracture their already tenuous dynamics, but it was necessary. It was foundational. Enough, Mr. Thompson finally spat, irritation lacing his tone. Your sensitivities don't alter the facts. What is it you want? A raise? More hours? A fancy title? His disdain dripped from each syllable, but something about the challenge lit a spark inside her. I want us to matter, Sarah declared, her voice growing even stronger. I want to challenge the notion that profits are the only thing you can hold on to. It is not just currency that gives value to our work. It is the impact we have on our community, and that should lead our decisions. As she spoke, Sarah scarcely noticed that other voices had begun to join hers. Jennifer leaned forward, echoing Sarah's sentiments with passion, while others followed suit one by one, words overlapping in anxious fervor. This collective surge stood on the precipice of transformation, and yet she could feel the stirrings of resistance emanate from the board. Just then, Mark, emboldened by Sarah's fire, turned to face the executives. You can brush us aside, but know this, we're not going anywhere. This conversation is just the beginning. With uncertainty rippling through the air, Sarah seized on the momentum. With adrenaline coursing through her, she knew she was ready to take another significant step. Could she find a way to turn this confrontation into a strategy that would not just settle for a few reassurances, but demand structural changes? The thought sparked her next challenge. The time had come to face the consequences of their stance, but first she had to galvanize her confidence. Would appealing to the executive's sense of compassion trigger change or merely harden their resolve? As the atmosphere thickened with anticipation, uncertainty branched out into a myriad of possibilities, gripping Sarah in its fierce embrace. The tension in the room wasn't just an abstract sensation. It clung to Sarah like a suffocating veil, each heartbeat seeming to amplify the stakes. Confident voices flooded her mind, echoing from the rallying support she had ignited, but its rhythm was interrupted by a persistent undercurrent of doubt. What if she had misjudged their readiness for change? As the board members remained impassive, she saw Mr. Thompson's lips tighten, an omen that he still saw the conversation as frivolous. But she wouldn't relent. This was more than a business meeting. It
was an existential crossroad for every employee in the room. Instead of waiting for someone else to lead the charge, Sarah squared her shoulders. She recognized that this moment was a mirror reflecting her past. Too often had she restrained her voice for the sake of comfort. No more. She would rise above her previous self, unearthing the strength buried beneath layers of hesitation. It was time to put her ideals into practice. "Let's be clear," she stated, each word trembling with determination. "This isn't about personal gain. This is about our future as a company that values its people. If we don't address our employees' needs, we risk everything: morale, retention, and ultimately profit." A wave of discomfort rippled through the boardroom. Sarah noticed Jennifer's eyes widen. A silent charge passed between them, bolstering her resolve. She may have initiated this conversation, but the community among her colleagues was now palpable. They were no longer just spectators to her plea. They were participants actively advocating for their collective well-being. "Consider the turnover rates," she continued, her voice not wavering. "We've all seen the talent walk out the door just as quickly as it came in. How are we supposed to stay relevant if we ignore the human element of our business? It all starts with respect." The silence that followed was almost numbing, planting seeds of uncertainty in her heart. They had a choice to make. Would they see her as an adversary or as an ally pointing toward preservation and growth? But the briefest moment of doubt etched on Mr. Thompson's face gave her hope. She pushed further, stretching her arguments like a sculptor shaping clay into something wholly new. "Last year, we lost some of our brightest minds because they felt unheard and unvalued. We need to build our environment back up, or we may find ourselves devoid of leaders who steer this company forward." Boldly, Sarah leaned in, meeting Thompson's steely gaze. "And we cannot rely solely on a bottom line that disregards hardship. Are we willing to sacrifice our work culture for profit margins, or do we commit to investing in our team?" On cue, Mark stepped up beside her, echoing her thoughts with contagious energy. "We're asking for accountability, not compliance. It's simple. Employees who feel valued will bring their best selves to work." With each additional voice joining the conversation, an unexpected solidarity began to coalesce. It was exhilarating yet daunting, the room oscillating between heightened expectations and palpable skepticism. And deep within, Sarah felt a sense of empowerment surging through her. This was her call to action, a moment to channel her voice into a movement, not just a mere statement. The heavy weight of responsibility bore down upon her, and amidst her resolve, doubts peeked through once again. What if they dismissed their collective aspirations again? Sarah inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the present moment. The time for hesitation was over. Decisions made in silence were the very poison to a thriving workplace. As the board continued their deliberation, Sarah realized she had transformed from a passive participant into an active agent of change. Her experience in this singular moment would dictate the path moving forward. She needed to harness this momentum into a wider strategy, one that fortified their united front while engaging the board. But what could that strategy look like?
As she formulated her next move, shadows of adversity loomed ahead. Was she prepared to confront a rigid corporate culture head-on, risking everything to nurture the growth she longed to see? The thought ignited both fear and anticipation. It was time to set her strategy in motion. The next confrontation would determine if transformational dialogue could indeed lead to actionable change, or if they would remain shackled by tradition. Would their voices lead to liberation, or would complacency silence the future Sarah envisioned? The boardroom remained thick with uncertainty, as each passing moment felt like an eternity. Sarah could almost hear the weight of her heartbeat, coupled with the silent deliberations of her peers. She scanned their faces, trying to gauge their thoughts, their emotions. Were they truly ready to embrace the discomfort of change, or would they retreat into the safety of complacency? When Mr. Thompson finally broke the silence, the room held its breath. "You make a compelling case, Sarah," he started, his tone measured yet condescending. "But we need concrete proposals, actionable items. Idealism won't sustain this business." A flicker of irritation ignited in Sarah, but with her newfound resolve, she sought to channel that energy productively. "That's precisely what I aim to present, Mr. Thompson. But we can't forge a plan without acknowledging the core issues first. We're not merely looking at numbers, we're looking at lives and careers." The challenge lay before her, transforming abstract intentions into definitive actions. Sarah felt a sudden shift within. Instead of crumbling under pressure, she realized this was the crux of her professional growth. Here was her chance to redefine what it meant to lead within these walls. "Let's prioritize a culture audit," she proposed, quickly sketching the outline in her mind. "We could survey employees, gather data on morale, and identify retention barriers. This would provide us with the foundation to create initiatives like mentorship programs, flexible scheduling, and well-being workshops." Mark nodded in agreement, joining in. "Support systems built from genuine feedback can help align our workforce with the company's vision. We need to empower our people, making them feel they truly belong." Skepticism loomed still. Sarah's heart raced as the board's expressions were mixed, some curious, others hardened by long-standing traditions. She confronted each face, hoping to evoke empathy. It felt pivotal, like the moment before breaking through glass. One wrong move could send everything shattering. Thompson's frown deepened. "While I respect your passion, this isn't some non-profit niche. We have shareholders to answer to. Implementing these suggestions could lead to financial strain. Or," she interjected, courage bolstering her voice, "it could lead to a much stronger retention rate."
Companies that value their employees outperform their competitors in the long run. Isn't that worth the investment? The room stilled again, a palpable tension lingering. She pushed against the silence, leaning into it. "Let's not just react to numbers. Let's reshape how we measure success. Profit is essential, but we must redefine our strategy to incorporate human capital as a powerful asset." She could sense the shift. New possibilities hung like a delicate thread in the air. The combination of her passion and statistics offered a compelling narrative, but her stomach churned with the weight of potential dismissal. Would the board grasp her vision, or was she merely spinning her wheels? Suddenly, Jennifer spoke up. "I think we should explore this notion, Mr. Thompson. What's the harm in initiating a pilot program? It could be small-scale, less intimidating for our shareholders." Sarah's heart stuttered at the unexpected support. It was as if a wave had begun to build, creating momentum. Encouraged by this communal energy, she set her next step into focus. "If we commit to making just one change, say implementing a feedback loop, we could see immediate improvements. This may prove our worth to the company's future." The conversation swirled around the table, arguments for and against jangling against one another, forming cracks in the board's staunch demeanor.
Sarah harnessed that dynamism. She felt her confidence surge, her belief in the project growing stronger. It was now or never, if only she could capitalize on this momentum. But the urgency in the room also beckoned terror. What if they backtracked or dismissed the potential just as the conversation had pivoted? Sarah felt that creeping doubt resurface, along with the visceral fear of being sidelined once again. Through it all, her mind raced ahead. If they hesitated now, would they lose this rare chance for reform? The stakes felt impossibly high. So many lives hung in the balance, tethered to her ambition. She tightened her resolve. "We're at a crossroads," she asserted, trying to project authority. "Let's be the leaders who embrace change rather than resist it. We have the opportunity to inspire. Don't we owe it to our employees and to ourselves to forge a better future?" As seconds passed like hours, Sarah wondered if she was pushing too hard. Then Mr. Thompson shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward. "Okay, Sarah, let's say we decide to explore this further. What are your immediate next steps?" The question hung in the air, electric and promising. Sarah's heart quickened. This was the opening she needed. But would she be able to articulate a clear plan without losing her footing in the moment? The pressure loomed larger now as she prepared to map out a strategy that could not only win over her colleagues but transform the company. "First, we need to identify the key areas of concern within our current culture," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the tempest of emotions swirling inside her. The anticipation in the room was electric, but she couldn't allow fear to derail her focus. "We could launch a confidential survey that allows employees to express their experiences freely, particularly around job satisfaction and support from management." She saw several faces soften momentarily, intrigued. Sarah pressed forward, encouraged. "Next, we'll analyze the data to draw correlations between employee morale and our recent turnover rates. This data-driven approach is not just logical, it demonstrates to the board that there's a financial case for caring about our employees." "Interesting," Mark said, leaning in. "What about implementation? How do we ensure these changes actually take root?" "Excellent point," she acknowledged, allowing herself a brief moment of gratitude for support. "Once we gather the data, we can hold focus groups to discuss the findings and involve employees directly in crafting solutions. This raises ownership levels, making them stakeholders in their workplace culture." The dialogue shifted, flowing more dynamically as Sarah traded ideas with her colleagues. They debated potential obstacles, called out potential pitfalls, and even tossed around suggestions for engagement techniques. Yet internally, Sarah wrestled with a pervasive fear. What if the enthusiasm fizzled out once they left the boardroom? What if Mr. Thompson's skepticism proved infectious? She bit her lip, consciously forcing the self-doubt back. "We can have initial reports ready in a month and commit to regular updates. Let's show our commitment to the transparency we're hoping to instill throughout the company." "A bold timeline," Thompson observed, now seemingly engaged rather than adversarial. "But what's the backup plan if things don't go as hoped?" Sarah took a breath. "We adapt. If the feedback indicates resistance, we listen. We're not dictating terms. The folks in this room may have years of experience, but it's our employees who truly understand the pulse of the company. The more we listen, the better equipped we are to adapt our methods." "Very well," Thompson finally replied, his tone revealing a trace of respect. "I want to hear results, and soon." "Absolutely. I will ensure we create clear metrics to measure success," Sarah replied, a spark of adrenaline surging through her as she focused on the horizon rather than lingering doubts. This was a pivotal moment. She wasn't just proposing changes. She was actively creating a framework for accountability and growth. As the meeting wrapped, a mixture of relief and apprehension rushed over her. She felt exhilarated. The board was backing her ideas, albeit hesitantly. But there was still the moment of truth ahead, turning these principles into action. The stakes had escalated,
and Sarah now bore the burden of initiation. In the days that followed, Sarah immersed herself in research and comparative studies, drawing parallels with other companies that had successfully implemented cultural changes. As she worked, she revisited the personal stories of individuals who thrived in supportive environments, stories that fueled her unwavering belief in her vision. One evening, while compiling notes, she stumbled upon an article about a company that had turned itself around by reshaping its inner culture. The success stemmed from
extraordinary efforts that fostered trust and inclusivity. It ignited a thought within her. Sarah realized she had been subconsciously fearing the consequences of failure. But what if instead she focused on the impact her success could create? Buoyed by this realization, she reached for her phone to schedule a meeting with key stakeholders, those not merely holding power, but who might also inspire others. The progression from mere idea to actionable change was a leap she now felt equipped to take, but doubts still lingered at the edge of her mind. What if they resisted? What if she failed to capture the vision she was cultivating? Would her colleagues still rally around her, or would she find herself standing alone at the forefront of an uphill battle? With the palpable silence of the evening surrounding her, Sarah flipped the page of her notebook. "It's time," she whispered to herself, feeling a renewed sense of purpose wash over her. "I need to lead them into this change, one conversation at a time." The next chapter loomed, not just for the company, but for her growth as a leader. As she prepared to take those crucial steps, the weight of leadership pressed heavier upon her shoulders, and she knew she would encounter challenges that would force her to confront not just the company's resistance, but her own vulnerabilities. Tomorrow, she would embrace that daunting choice to plunge into the unknown waters ahead. The moment of truth was finally on the horizon. Would she emerge victorious, or would she drown in the very changes she sought to implement? The morning sun slanted through the blinds, illuminating Sarah's makeshift office, littered with notes and data points. Today felt different. A palpable tension hung in the air, matched only by her fierce determination. She had set the meeting with the stakeholders for 10 a.m., and as the clock ticked closer, she felt the familiar surge of anxious energy that had, until now, been both daunting and exhilarating. In the moments leading up to the meeting, self-doubt wove through her thoughts like a persistent thread. What if they dismiss her ideas outright? What if they questioned her credentials? Each scenario flashed by like images in a slideshow, but she fought to ground herself in the present. Sarah visualized those personal stories she had come across, the individual transformations that occurred when companies embraced their employees. This wasn't just about statistics. This was about reshaping lives, one small change at a time. The team assembled in a small conference room, the air thick with anticipation. Sarah stood at the front, a sense of purpose filling her chest. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady. "Today, we're not just discussing numbers or charts. We're talking about setting a foundation for a culture rooted in trust and support." A few heads nodded, but Sarah caught Mark's skeptical gaze, his brow furrowed. "What specific changes are you proposing, Sarah?" he pressed, the challenge in his tone unmistakable. "First, we'll implement a confidential survey," she replied, heart pounding slightly. "This will allow employees to share their experiences candidly. I believe that understanding their thoughts will inform our next steps." "And how do you plan to get them to participate? They're not accustomed to sharing their honest opinions," Mark cautioned, crossing his arms. Her pulse quickened as his words cut deeper than she anticipated. "By ensuring anonymity and demonstrating that their voices genuinely matter. We'll initiate focus groups where their concerns can directly influence our strategies." The room buzzed with a mix of intrigue and skepticism, prompting Sarah to press further. "If we want our workforce to be engaged, we need to show them that their experiences are valued, not just through words, but through actions. Every participant will have a role in shaping our new initiatives." "I see where you're going," Mark conceded slightly, his frown softening.
But what if this backfires? If we open this can of worms, there could be feelings and criticisms we're not prepared to handle. A knot formed in Sarah's stomach as she recognized his point. What if all the buried grievances surfaced, and instead of empowering employees, she accidentally stoked dissatisfaction? What would that reveal about her own capabilities? "I understand your concern," she responded, lowering her voice. "But this is a pivotal moment for us. I am confident that by facing these issues head-on, we can foster an environment that empowers our employees. We might encounter discomfort, but discomfort can inspire growth." A contemplative silence settled over the room. It was a delicate balance, responding to potential fears while holding firm to her vision. Sarah turned to the group, her determination solidifying. "By focusing on avenues for engagement, we position ourselves to transform not just the culture, but our productivity and satisfaction rates too. I am prepared for challenges, and I will lean on all of you for support. We are in this together." While tension still lingered, there was a shift, an emerging sense of collective ownership, or at least curiosity. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt a weight lift. She had addressed her fear and galvanized support. But beneath that elation swirled a new layer of uncertainty. What if the commitment she'd inspired crumbled in the face of harsh realities? And as she exited the meeting room, a single question reverberated in her mind, echoing the clash of hope and fear pulsating in her chest. Was she strong enough to lead, even when discontent rose around her? She took a deep breath, contemplating the crossroads before her. The next steps would demand not only her strategic acumen, but courage to navigate a volatile environment. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, unfolding opportunities. But for now, fear and anticipation entwined as she faced the most daunting realization yet. Leading change required more than her vision. It demanded resilience. Would her resolve withstand the trial of true implementation? Or would the very changes she championed expose her weaknesses? The evening after the meeting was restless. As Sarah
Sat on her couch, a half-empty glass of water resting on the coffee table beside her, her mind replayed the discussions from earlier. Questions echoed through her mind. How could she ensure the commitment she had inspired didn't fade away? As much as she yearned for a smooth transition into a new culture, she knew the path ahead would be riddled with unexpected turns. The stakes lay heavy on her shoulders, every perceived challenge growing larger in her imagination. What if the initial enthusiasm wore off? What if employees remained disengaged, viewing her efforts as mere gestures rather than real change? Anxiety seeped into her thoughts, each potential misstep looming larger than life. Yet beneath the apprehension lay a burgeoning determination. This wasn't just about bureaucracy or mandates. It was about people, their experiences, and behavior. She needed a strategy not merely to implement change, but to inspire and sustain momentum. Drawing a deep breath, she reached for her laptop, intent on crafting an actionable plan. Each keystroke felt like reclaiming a piece of her agency. A few hours later, with her eyes weary but her mind invigorated, Sarah had sketched out the first draft of a communication roadmap. She aimed to create transparency, setting milestones not only for the surveys and focus groups, but also for action plans that would evolve based on feedback. Communication would be vital. Sharing both successes and setbacks would be essential in building trust. Despite the late hour, a spark ignited within her when she envisioned how to present this roadmap to the stakeholders the following week. Would she step into the room with confidence and passion? More than that, could she transform her insecurity into a source of inspiration for others? She needed to address the hidden fears in herself, the self-doubt that sometimes eclipsed her abilities. The next morning, she stepped into her office with a mission. The day would begin with a decision, one that was personal yet relevant to her professional journey.
Sarah contacted a mentor she had long respected, someone whose approach to leadership had always inspired her. Asking for feedback and advice was daunting, risking exposure of her vulnerabilities. Yet she recognized the necessity of support. After a brief exchange, they set a time to meet later that week. As she prepared her materials for the upcoming presentation, inklings of self-belief emerged once more. The act of reaching out had illuminated a path ahead. She was reeling from a revelation that concerned her competence. Perhaps she needed to leverage the strength of her network instead of carrying the burden alone. Would leaning on those with more experience provide the wisdom that could navigate this turbulence? While arranging her notes, a new thought lodged itself in her consciousness. Was it time to confront Mark openly? A confrontation that could either solidify or fracture their professional relationship. A forceful skeptic, he had challenged her ideas, but there was potential in his perspective. If Sarah could turn his skepticism into collaboration, perhaps they could jointly cultivate an environment conducive to real change, a partnership born from contrast. The tension began to build inside her. It was one thing to devise strategies, another to engage in direct confrontation. She imagined facing Mark, armed not only with facts, but with an authentic willingness to listen and learn. Would he respond with contempt or curiosity? Could they align despite their differences? The thought gripped her with both hope and dread. With mounting anticipation, she found herself at a precipice, balancing between fear of failure and the exhilarating possibility of collective growth. Uncertainty lingered, and as she prepared for the challenges ahead, a single realization washed over her. The time had come to face Mark and discover whether their perspectives could forge an alliance strong enough to drive the necessary change. Would she muster the courage to initiate that conversation, or would fear once again overshadow her resolve? As Sarah entered the meeting room where she was set to meet Mark, the weight of her journey collided with the reality of the moment. She recalled how far she had come, from a quiet cashier overwhelmed by the demands of life to a determined advocate for change. This awaited conversation might very well prove to be the pivotal point in both her personal evolution and the store's future. "Mark," she greeted him with a firm handshake, her voice steady. "I appreciate you taking the time to talk today." "Of course, Sarah," he replied, a hint of curiosity lighting his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about our last discussion. You might have a point about engaging the team more. But what's the next step?" At that moment, she realized this was not only about impetus, but about collaboration. "I believe our path forward requires more than just immediate initiatives. It needs a dedicated plan. I've been outlining a communication strategy to ensure everyone's voice is heard during this transition," she shared, her enthusiasm palpable. Mark leaned in, examining her notes. Sarah detailed her intention for anonymous surveys and inclusive focus groups that would empower employees to contribute their insights. "We need them to feel they matter, to know their experiences aren't just statistics on a spreadsheet," she asserted, her conviction unwavering. Seeing his expression shift from skepticism to interest fueled her resolve. She continued, "We need to implement regular updates on progress, encouraging the team to engage with our evolving culture. It is imperative they understand the journey we are embarking on as a collective." "I see your commitment," Mark conceded, nodding thoughtfully. "But how do we ensure this doesn't become just another empty corporate initiative? I want to see actual results." Sarah couldn't help but smile at the challenge. Mark's apprehension mirrored her own journey of self-doubt transformed into confidence. "What if we involve team leaders as ambassadors of this change?" she proposed. "Train them to share stories, keep morale high, and build enthusiasm around the initiatives. If we make key players accountable, the burden won't all fall on our shoulders. Plus, it legitimizes the message from within." Mark's brow furrowed, an immediate light of approval shining in his eyes. "That's a strong idea. It builds ownership around the initiatives and helps alleviate some pressure off us both." We become facilitators for a broader conversation, she explained, her confidence blossoming. Together, they began to create a blueprint that married Sarah's vision with Mark's strategic outlook, merging the need for a human-centered approach with accountability. As they spoke, the tension dwindled. Room for collaboration opened as they exchanged roles, casting aside the doubts that had once formed a divide. Let's commit to tracking our engagement metrics alongside morale. I believe real change means not only listening, but also acting on employee feedback, she encouraged, her voice steady and strong. Then let's set a timeline. In 3 months, we'll assess the cultural changes through the lens of these metrics. We'll need to demonstrate real shifts. Mark nodded, a partnership beginning to form. Feeling the momentum building between them, Sarah realized this dialogue was no longer just practical. It signified a transformation in leadership, proof that embracing vulnerability could yield collaborative strength. Their session wrapped not only with clear directives, but with an understanding forged in trust. Mark's skepticism had transformed into proactive engagement, and as Sarah left the room, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. No longer burdened by hesitation, she embraced the connection they had cultivated. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Sarah watched the tapestry of their plan unfold. The surveys yielded compelling feedback, and focus groups emerged, giving rise to new ideas resonating beyond their initial scope. Her colleagues reported increased satisfaction and clarity. They felt not only heard, but valued. One afternoon at the store, Sarah greeted each customer with newfound purpose. Her interactions infused not just with energy, but with genuine connection. Mia's laughter wove through the air, grounding her in the wonder of her dual roles as a mother and a leader. As the quarterly meeting approached, Sarah found herself standing at the forefront, prepared to present the visible improvements to the store's culture and performance. Mark's and her initial partnership had blossomed into a cohesive strategy with validated impacts. Reduced turnover, improved morale, and increased engagement scores had all spiked dramatically. The room filled with a sense of pride, echoing with affirmations as she recounted stories of her colleagues whose lives were enriched through these changes. This wasn't just about data. This was about humanity, she concluded, locking eyes with everyone present. As applause enveloped her, Sarah felt a wave of fulfillment wash over her. She had not only conquered her fears, but had established herself as an undeniable force of change. This wasn't merely about keeping a store open. It was about reshaping a community through well-being, reinforced by genuine care. Through the trials and triumphs, she understood her journey had transformed her incipient insecurities into unshakable confidence, an inner strength she would carry into every future endeavor.
Of recognition, Sarah knew she had achieved something extraordinary. Transformation through courage and collaboration, anchoring her in a newfound sense of purpose. This was her moment, a combination of insight, bravery, and fierce determination woven into the very fabric of her identity. She stood not just as a survivor of her past, but as a champion of her future. Now the rest of the world awaited. You need to subscribe now to catch more transformative stories just like this. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let others know they're not alone. Comment below your thoughts on Sarah's journey and share your theories about what's next. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this story of individual overcoming. Let's spread the message far and wide.